What is up, Sats fans? Welcome back to Swan Signal Live. It's been a couple weeks. We took a little time off to be with friends and family, but we're back here with you on Genesis Day. 16 years ago on this day, Satoshi booted up the Bitcoin network. Here we are now talking about Bitcoin on a global scale in conversations in the most important halls, hallowed halls around this world. People are mentioning the word Bitcoin. It's absolutely incredible what's happened in the first 16 years of Bitcoin's life. We're entering what will be, and I will say this without qualification, what will be an absolutely massive year for Bitcoin and for monetary history itself. We are witnessing and a part of a turning point in human history. Gentlemen, it was great to spend some time with you this week in Miami at Michael Saylor's place.
I still got the bracelet on.
Here we are at in front of the famous boat where he's sat at that desk and did a bunch of his podcasts, especially the earlier ones. That was a lot of fun, guys. Any takeaways from
looking at this
100K
photo?
party?
You guys need to understand. Brady is 6 feet tall. Just so you know, looking at this photo, I don't want you to walk away having any mistaken impressions.
Yeah, I'm not 5'6", and those guys are like normal height. Those guys are giants. So
6'2" over here, by the way. When you're 6'2" and you're the third tallest guy in the picture.
yeah, exactly. We've got ourselves a basketball team. I'm the point guard.
Man, it's a lot of fun though.
Yeah, what do you guys think? What's your takeaway, Steven?
It was iconic. I mean, it was just and it was an iconic event. Okay, so this is a quote somebody said to me at the party that I loved, and they said, "This party," and I think you were saying it too, Brady. This party marked the end of the beginning. And I loved that. I tweeted it. I even did a thread with that as the title today. But I think it was this kind of moment in time that I think marked the end of the early stage of Bitcoin. I'm not saying there's not a whole universe to still kind of unfold here, but the very early days, it's 100,000. B, it's this massive party at this Miami compound and everyone's there and it's on the media and governments are trying to adopt it. Like, we're in a different phase, and the party, I don't know, it marked that for me.
John, Haar, your takeaways?
I would summarize it as Bitcoin Twitter comes to life in a great Gatsby themed party on Miami Beach.
Gatsby, definitely had Gatsby vibes.
It was incredible. I have to also mention the music. It was a welcome change for me in my household. The music we listen to these days is more like Wheels on the Bus, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Jack and Jill Went Up the Hill, and Sailor's DJs had a different selection, which is welcome for me.
Absolutely. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything said so far. The party was awesome. It was a very memorable time. Probably the best party I've ever been to from a technical sense.
Yeah,
like all the different rooms and the food and the vibe, and it's never crowded, but it's never feels empty. Yeah, just all very well done. He's got his yacht out back. Go to the cold bar at the pool house, the pizza over there, whatever. So very, very good. I think end of the beginning lands for me. I think we're definitely transitioning to a period where if you look at it on the S curve, we can say the early majority are starting to enter the party. I don't know if that's true, but that's what it feels like to me. I think the next marginal buyer of Bitcoin is a little bit less revolutionary energy and a little bit more normal people who, the herd already said it's okay to buy it, so I'll just buy it because it's obvious. And pretty soon it'll be, oh yeah, this whole thing was obvious. I've owned it the whole time, right? And people will rewrite their own history. And so for me personally, that's actually makes Bitcoin less interesting, because the early adopter folks are crazy revolutionary weirdos writing weird essays and talking about this esoteric stuff. And so I think we're transitioning out of that, which is okay. That means we're winning. There's nothing wrong with that. It's also me being a hipster saying, like, I like this band before it was cool, right? And so discount my opinion entirely if you feel that's true. My biggest surprise actually was maybe within the first 30 minutes, look over my shoulder and it's none other than the Babe Ruth of Bitcoin chills. And if you don't know who that is, you're part of the early majority. That was, of course, Trace Mayer. So as far as I know, this was his first public sighting since 3-4 years ago, however long ago that was. Maybe
unconfiscatable. Yeah, 4 years ago, whatever it was. But that was it when he was shilling Mimble Wimble on the little sheet of paper. I've had my theories about that. I don't know. Trace did write a website, create a website called How to Disappear, right? How to Vanish. HowToVanish.com. And then I think perhaps, at least my likely explanation in my mind is that he executed a reputational boating accident to vanish. And maybe his intention was to do that permanently, but it sounds to me like, he's feeling a calling with Bitcoin in the position where it is to come back onto the scene. And there he was. Definitely a surprise to see him. And of course, today is Proof of Keys Day, which Trace started a while back as a way to celebrate taking custody of your own keys, of self-sovereignty, and how important that is to the network in terms of maintaining decentralization and all that. So, and just for personal protection of your money, the Bitcoin affords you that ability, and you should take advantage of it when you're ready. If you're not yet ready, work to get ready and take control of your own keys.
What years would you guys say Trace Mayer was most active in his Bitcoin education?
I think it's like probably 2014 to 2016 is what I think. He had the Bitcoin Knowledge podcast really early, along with Let's Talk Bitcoin, headed up by Andreas Antonopoulos. I think noted overlapped with Bitcoin Knowledge podcast. Pierre and Bitstein's podcast, probably toward the end of Bitcoin Knowledge podcast, is probably like also TFTC and what Bitcoin did, etc. Citizen Bitcoin came soon after that as well. But I think he hung it up, the podcast, before his reputational boating accident. But amazing stuff. Like there are ranters that we love in the space. Guy Swan, American Hodl come to mind. But this guy was the Babe Ruth of Bitcoin shills. His rants were absolutely epic. And of course, Andreas too has to be on that list. But
yeah, couple that here. So go back and read or listen to Bitcoin Knowledge podcast. It still hits. Read the 7 network effects. Yeah, this was one of the most foundational pieces of Bitcoin education history. He came up with the Mayer multiple, or popularized it. I don't know what the word is, but it's just
somebody else named it. Yeah.
Price over 200-day moving average. It's a great way to look at time. If you're gonna do a large lump sum buy, good indicator to check. And he was active on Bitcoin Knowledge all through 2019, and even put out one in 2020. So,
are you
right
saying
still,
you can just name a multiple after yourself? Dude,
I don't know if he
didn't name it, but
okay, because I'm like, I want to do like the
honor.
Lubka multiple, and it's hours of sunlight per day, like divided by like weather. That's nice to be outside. Because if we're just naming multiples, man,
I like it. Let's get this written up and put it out into the world. Before I forget, I've got to thank Mara for supporting the show and securing the Bitcoin network. Speaking of securing the Bitcoin network, so thanks to them for that. We really appreciate the support. All right, gentlemen, we are now in 2025. We've been talking about it for a while, that this is really shaping up to be an incredible year, especially after the results of the presidential election cycle, and including in the House and Senate and in state houses and senates around the country as well. So let's just go through some of the biggest things. In fact, I got to shout this out real quick. Here we go. Here's the cover, the story that was cited as a proof of a timestamp, basically, in the Genesis block. It's the famous headline: Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks, in the Times newspaper. Absolutely epic day for Bitcoin. The most epic day, right? This is the beginning of the network. So I just wanted to show the cover there of the paper. So gentlemen, let's talk about kind of how things wrapped up for the year real quick, and then we'll jump into predictions and see where that leads us. John, we've got some asset class performance returns for 2024 that will be good to look at to kind of set the scene for where we are heading into 2025. So I'm going to throw these few charts up and let you kind of tee them up, and we'll go around.
For sure. Yeah, perfect. Was hoping you would start with that one. So this is Charlie Bolello. He does these great kind of market aggregation stats. He does these. People have put out different forms of this chart. Sometimes they change the ordering based on the year, so you can just go across the top and see what was the best performer. He does them in static places, so you do have to look and make sure that there's not like another asset class that outperformed Bitcoin. But in this case, I'm just looking through this. Every Bitcoin, it's the way you can read this chart is that with the exception of the 3 red years for Bitcoin is the best performing asset. So that, some people, maybe you take away 2011 because it was like so ridiculously early. The price was so low. No one was really looking at it as a macro asset. I don't know. I'm just trying to give credence to the people who might say, oh, you should really start this in 2014, something like that. But even if you did, we're now looking at 8 out of 11 years that Bitcoin is the best performing macro asset. And in many of those years, it's not like it just, squeaked out a victory over bonds or over stocks or something. Like we're talking like, 50% outperformance in percentage points outperformance that Bitcoin has. So last 2 years was 156% in 2023, followed by another 121% return in 2024. And I think this chart does eventually get through to call them like the professional investor class, whether that is a financial advisor, someone running a family office, an institutional investor who's managing money for other large institutions. They eventually see this and it's like, how many years does this trend need to continue before you'll at least dip a toe in? So I think this does matter, and yearly performance, like people share it, it's just a huge thing on Wall Street. When I was there, your inbox at the beginning of January would be flooded with research pieces at the beginning of January saying, hey, we're recapping 2024 and here's the predictions for 2025. So, and I think this is going to get through to people. It is a gradual process. They're not going to allocate a massive amount, but single digit percentage allocations, I think, are reasonable when you're looking at an asset that I don't want to say it's proven, but every year that goes by, it's getting more and more proven. And it's just getting harder and harder to ignore. This probably also launches into, we don't want to just recap the past. We want to talk about 2025. You don't have to be
just real quick right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
To reiterate, like single digit percentage allocation is massive, dude. Like if you got a 1% allocation out of the world, I mean, you're talking Bitcoin in the high 6 figures. So like, that's how low the bar is. I just wanted to just double click on that a little bit. Like single digit allocation would be huge.
100%. We're looking at a total pool of assets that people estimate to be 900 trillion, and Bitcoin is still in the neighborhood of 2 trillion. So, and so many people just have a zero, people and entities have a zero allocation today. So just like Steven's saying, a tiny allocation moves the needle tremendously. Just a couple more comments. Basically, I just wanted to throw out there, like, you don't need to have a PhD in statistics to recognize a pattern here that Bitcoin has.
In fact, you need to not have one specifically.
In fact, it will help you tremendously if you don't have a background in statistics or economics to realize that Bitcoin
mind has the advantage here.
Yes. There's clearly a pattern here of 3 good years followed by a negative year for Bitcoin. The huge debate that even passionate Bitcoiners disagree on to a certain extent is, will we continue to see these 4-year cycles? What will the blow off tops look like? What will the bear markets feel like? Those are all questions that we'll probably touch on a little bit here, but that's obviously the big question. I think most people are expecting a positive year for Bitcoin in 2025. Some people just are saying, well, I think the patterns are going to continue. Other people take a more fundamental look and say, look what's happening with fiscal policy, monetary policy, adoption, and that's what's going to drive 2025 to be positive. So that's what I think of when I see this page here, Brady.
Yeah, take a look at the 2015 through 2017 green years. First green year after the red, 35%, then 125%, then 1,331% in the big run up. Most of that happened in a few weeks toward the end of 2017. Last cycle was 95% in the first year after the red year, then 301, then 66. Right now we're at 156, which is by far the largest increase in the year after the down year that we've seen so far, then 121 in 2024. So if it's more like the 2017 year, which I think there are fundamental catalysts that could drive it to behave more like 2017 than 2021, when
2021 was kneecapped, though.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
2021 was cut short. It was cut short by two main factors. One, Sam Bankman-Fried is selling paper Bitcoin the whole time and artificially pumping Solana and other coins, which drew inflows to those assets. So one, the whole SBF thing messes it up. And then two, you have the China ban in the middle of it, the mining ban. And then you get this kind of massive Fed rate hiking thing, at the end. It was a very odd cycle. And, I always tell people don't index too hard to that.
Right. Yeah, the fundamentals are a lot different right now going into this third green year as part of this historic cycle. So I could see it behaving more like 2017 with a much higher run up than some might expect right now. And we can talk about the catalysts, and we have been talking about the potential catalysts for that kind of performance. But we'll get into that. John, let's take a look at, Brandon, let me check in with you before we look at this next chart.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to comment on that one. I have comments on like the cycles in the future. Are we going to have them? Are we not? If you want, I can go to that now. Otherwise, we can wait for that one.
Yeah, we're going to go through some prediction markets and give our own takes on them here in just a little bit. So,
Brady, just one more comment on this one. Just we've all been focused on the top row of this chart naturally. Just take a look at the bottom few rows here. So those are bonds, TIPS, treasury bonds, inflation, supposedly inflation protected, total bond market, investment grade corporate bonds, long duration treasuries. These were some of the worst performing assets of 2024. I don't want to burn bridges too hard here, but I will say this. My very senior person at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, basically one of the most senior partners, kind of like my boss's boss's boss, made a comment a year ago in December of 2023 saying that 2024 would be the year of bonds. And he went on CNBC. They, did an article on it. The headline is so-and-so says 2024 will be the year of bonds. This person has been in markets for 25 or more years. So just remember that professional investors with tons of experience, they don't always get calls correct. And sometimes the exact opposite happens. I think to a Bitcoiner, it's not very surprising that bonds were not a good investment. If you read people like Lynn Alden, like Luke Groman, they've been banging the table on this for quite some time. So I just wanted to shout that out because that obviously played out in the performance here. Avoiding bonds was a fantastic portfolio move for 2024.
All right, let's take a look at this chart. Again, I'll throw it to you, John, to set us up. It's a similar chart, but is focused on different set of assets. These are more stock assets and stock-related assets. So let's take a look at this and talk about it. Bitcoin's actually the third highest performing asset in 2024 on this chart. MicroStrategy being number one by far, more than doubling NVIDIA, which was in second place, a bit ahead of Bitcoin.
Yep. So I like what Alex Thorne at Galaxy did here because it is fair. You want to look at some more idiosyncratic assets because there are some people that have a huge position in these single name tech stocks, whether it's NVIDIA, Tesla, whatever else you see on the screen here. So people might say, hey, Bitcoin, I don't agree with this, but they might say Bitcoin's not really a macro asset. It's a speculative asset, as they say. So they want it to be compared to NVIDIA, Tesla, whatever. And we all know NVIDIA has been this incredible performer over the past 5 to 10 years. But it just shows you that MicroStrategy even blew NVIDIA out of the water. So I think the takeaway that Alex Thorne gave for this was you look at these assets and you see two out of the top three, it's either Bitcoin or a Bitcoin related equity, leveraged Bitcoin equity, as we're calling it. So again, I think it just catches people's attention. You're following NVIDIA, but you're going to ignore the best performing stock and the underlying commodity that helped it become the best performing stock. Just gets harder and harder to ignore. And then just one final comment. I saw a comment on Twitter that said, hey, you should include Palantir on there because Palantir had like an absolute rocket of a year. And Alex Thorne did say, yeah, that's fair. I'll include Palantir on the next version. But yeah, that's just kind of another way to look at performance of assets. But it's kind of like any way you slice it, you can't ignore Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and I think there's a way that Wall Street and the financial industry was able to ignore Bitcoin because there was no ETF. And so it was kind of like it was over here and none of your competition owned it. And as long as none of your competition owns it, it's like it doesn't really exist. If you're being compared to the fund next door and they own Bitcoin, well, now you're really messed up that they outperformed you. But if if all the funds your investors are comparing you to, none of them owned Bitcoin, then it doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact your day to day. And the reason they didn't own Bitcoin is because there was no ETF and there was no MicroStrategy. So it was like very hard for these pools of capital to get access. That's all changed. And I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of knock-on effects.
That's an enormous point, by the way. Like comparative performance for professional investors means like almost everything.
It's everything.
So you could, it's a great point, Stephen. They could kind of ignore it just to be like, my peers aren't doing it, so I can basically pretend it doesn't exist. And that's just not really the case anymore. Whether you look at convertible bonds specifically or just macro performance, it's like people are doing it. So now you have to compare yourself and benchmark yourself to those people.
Even further on what you just said, it made me think of something. My peers aren't doing it. Therefore, if I buy it and it goes down, I'm going to get sued.
Or they just say, if I buy it and it goes up, massive outperformance opportunity here. It's like, you could arrive at the same answer from a lot of different directions.
Just in the when you're a fund manager, you don't really want to be the first one to do something.
It's the career risk thing.
It's a career risk, and it's like. And it's kind of like, it's, I mean, this from your time. And like, if you're doing something that's seen as too idiosyncratic and it boosts the volatility too much, it's like, whoa, you're really not a industry standard here.
Let's take a look at ETFs at the end of the year. Obviously, one of the biggest events in the Bitcoin ecosystem last year. Here are the final numbers for the 2024 performance of the ETFs. John, I'll throw it to you again.
It's just responding to Max in the chat there. Love his. I don't know if my emojis come through, but I love your comments, Max. I mean, this is another one. It's like performance is obviously huge, but just, when we say performance, there's the quote. Love it. Love it. Get that on screen, baby. Yes. Okay. So usually when people say performance, they're talking about like nominal investment performance, like your returns. But flows is also like another performance metric that you have to think about, because you just become like a big ETF, you become a big asset class. And when people look at what they're going to allocate to, they want to see that there's already a bunch of assets there. I'm not even necessarily like defending that as an investment thesis, but that's just how these people think. Like, okay, how big is that market? How liquid is it? What were the flows last year? And if we go back to that chart from Bloomberg, IBIT is the number 3 ETF in terms of flows. And if you look, what's crazy about this is like what's below it. Well, first off, VOO, in case anyone's not familiar with that is an S&P 500 index fund. So S&P 500 is still, one of the biggest index funds to get flows in 2024. But IBIT's number 3. Most people think of SPY when they think of index fund flows. Like that's number 6. That's below Bitcoin. QQQ, that's top stocks in the NASDAQ. That's been like one of the best performing ETFs for the past 15 years.
And now
IBIT beat that.
MicroStrategy is getting part of that flow now too, right, John?
That's another good point to mention, for sure. It's just, what was eye-popping to me about this was to see IBIT, and remember, IBIT's just one of, like, what is it, 10 different ETFs that are out there.
Yep.
But IBIT has more flows in 2024 than QQQ and SPY. That's just astonishing.
There's a lot of appetite for this, and just, look at the appetite for MicroStrategy's leveraged products. It seems insatiable. Other companies are coming in to fill that demand. It still does not seem to be completely addressed yet. More demand than there is supply for LBEs, which is fascinating.
The Bitcoin ETF is the best performing ETF launch of all time. Like, it's just insane. And that's turning heads on Wall Street. That's turning heads in the media. It's turning heads everywhere. And, frankly, I think the best is yet to come. So, I mean, it's, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. Strive, Vivek, his asset management firm, is launching a bunch of Bitcoin ETF related. They're doing the convertible debt from the leveraged Bitcoin equities, the MicroStrategies. They're buying that in an ETF. You've got Bitwise is doing ETFs that track companies that have over, I think, 10,000 Bitcoin. So you're seeing this just absolutely spread and take over.
Okay, one last one here. It's the amount of dollar amounts that was processed by the Bitcoin network in 2024 adds up to $6.6 trillion, and that's corrected for likely change addresses. So it might be lower than a number that you may have seen on Twitter, another number you may have seen on Twitter. So that's a big number. $6.6 trillion changed hands on the Bitcoin network in 2024.
Much of it on a weekend, with no intermediary, for a fee of a few dollars. I think my most viral post ever on LinkedIn was one where I just shared that it was earlier this year. Someone sent $1 billion in a transaction. The fee was $7, and they sent it on a Sunday. And it's like, even if you hate Bitcoin, you don't care about sound money, you think Austrian economics is garbage, tell me the thing that you can use to send $1 billion.
And that's a problem. That's a problem we all have regularly. Like, how many Sundays have you woken up and be like, man, I need to move $1 billion? And it's stuck, dude. You call them. I mean, my God, who among us hasn't faced that issue?
All right, Steven doing a good job of playing the other side of it. Fair.
No. I'm just messing around. It's incredible. I mean, because it doesn't have to be $1 billion. It could be $1 million. It could be $100,000. It could be either way. You're stuck. You can't move it, and it could be international. It could be anywhere. No, it's a phenomenal point.
It's so much more efficient and effective at transferring value than the legacy sort of web of tangled web of networks and payment networks all over the world, and systems and protocols and blah. Bitcoin is extremely efficient and effective, and it's modern money for a modern world. So we've taken a look back at 2024. Oh, Brandon, go for it, man.
Let's see. I forgot to jump in on the stock performances over the last year. Palantir, I thought, was a very interesting case, up 400% in the last year. It's a defense company, been around for a long time. Why is it pumping right now? And I brought up defense, modern defense, in one of our previous episodes. It'll be a thing I'm following this year. But why is it pumping? Usually defense companies pump when the risk of war goes up. That's one. Another one is maybe because Peter Thiel co-founded Palantir, and so he's friends with Trump. So it's just a little behind the deal thing. Or because warfare is changing. And we're clearly and accurately representing the future of warfare as a needed transition. We're not doing aircraft carriers and fighter jets. We're focused on autonomous drones, swarms, cyber defense, autonomous vehicles of all kinds, et cetera. All this modern asymmetric warfare. And if that is true, then we should see the Palantirs and the Andurils of the world getting the lion's share of future contracts. And I think that is the right approach. It's clear that Boeing's going down. It's clear that all the old guard defense contractors are a husk of what they once were. So it's time for Silicon Valley to take over defense. I'm sure there'll be some problems with that, but it's necessary. So I'm here for it.
Fascinating. We'll keep an eye on that. That would be a big change. Okay, so let's talk about 2025, and let's make some predictions, and we'll take a look back at these predictions at the end of the year and see how we did. I thought a good way to do this, and we can come up with some other questions that may arise as we're talking about these, but I thought a good way to get started at least would be to look at some of these poly market stuff. Yeah, okay.
Tell a story here real quick. I want to tell a quick story.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. So I'm staying in I'm in a nice spot, and I'm walking by this table on the golf course. I'm just kind of taking a walk in the morning, and I overhear from the table near me. I mean, these two guys are talking, and one just goes, "I just think it's a better investment than gold." And I'm overhearing this, and I don't know for a fact what they're talking about, but like that's such a Bitcoin coded comment, and I'm reading that into it. But it's incredible just like being out in the world and seeing like the changing perceptions on Bitcoin. I thought it was a cool story.
Yeah, hearing Bitcoin mentioned out in the wild is fun. I've been hearing it a lot more since this run up for sure. I've had several instances where I've just been walking through the airport, for instance, on the way back from Miami, walking through the Miami airport, sat down to have some food, and a couple tables over, people were talking about Bitcoin. I was like, oh, maybe they're at the Bitcoin party. And I, went to say hi, and no, just, some normies talking about Bitcoin, and had a great conversation with them. A couple other times that's happened too. And it's cool to see that. Let's take a look at
one more, just like putting us in the time, like placing us in time. Tim Ferriss released a podcast recently with Kevin Rose, I think it was. They do like a year-end prediction thing, and I was a longtime fan, so I ended up listening to this one on the plane home from Miami. On the podcast, what was interesting is they did a previous episode a year or two ago, and they were talking about shitcoins, Bitcoin's boring, it's all about blockchain, whatever. And in this new one, they literally said, like, pretty much just buy all the Bitcoin, and they say, well, shitcoins are something else that's totally separate, you're going to get rugged. So even the Silicon Valley laggards, which is where I would actually, those guys are sort of in the middle. Maybe they represent like the median voice of Silicon Valley today. I think that's probably fair. Tim Ferriss is not on his edge anymore. But anyways, median Silicon Valley people are slandering shitcoins and saying buy Bitcoin. So
incredible.
Quittem, was there acknowledgement on their part to be like, hey, we used to have a different view and we've kind of changed our tune? Or was it one of these things where they just changed their tune and didn't really talk about what they said in the past?
There was a light acknowledgement of changing tune and some chuckles. I'm pretty sure Kevin Rose launched a bunch of NFT shitcoins and then shut them all down, and it was a whole mess, and he's probably really embarrassed. So he did not like say sorry, but there was some breadcrumbs to a change.
Okay. And
he doubled his position. He went from 5% to 10%, and it wasn't because number went up. He consciously doubled his position.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think we've won the Bitcoin, not shitcoin, narrative, like putting that meme out there. And if it's not completely won at this point, it's sort of out there and doing its thing on its own now. And we've got, people in mainstream media, for instance, representing that idea and the separation of the two. So that's awesome to see. And I think important, very important, maybe fundamental to really changing the trajectory of Bitcoin adoption, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good? You guys want to take a look at these poly market things? Okay. Start out with, the most popular one. What price will Bitcoin hit in 2025? So the high. We've got here 5% saying 5% chance hitting $1 million, 14% at 250K, jumps all the way down to 250K at 14%. 24% chance of 200K, 44% chance 150, 70% 130, goes down to 89% at 110, which is probably undervalued. So these are the numbers we're looking at. This is not a huge market, $221,000. I don't know how many people are involved here, but this is a good sort of launching point for us to talk about where price might go. What highs are we going to see in 2025? And who wants to go first?
Dude, the $200,000 contract is incredibly underpriced. Or actually, even the 250. Yeah, the 250. I mean, I would be a buyer of the 250 contract because even it's, I think 150 is, I think you buy 150, 200, and 250. I think all of those are like incredibly underpriced.
I agree completely. 14% at 250. Where would you put it, Steven?
I think that 150 to 250. Okay, I think 150 is like 90% plus chance on 150. I think 200 is probably 75% plus, and I think 250 at least 50%, maybe higher.
Nice. I think I agree with those numbers largely. I would put, so the 1 million at 5% is probably good. I might put it at 10% chance.
Yeah.
To me, the requirement for that to happen is the creation of the SBR. So if you believe that that's pretty likely, that would increase my projection there. I do think it's pretty likely. I'd say 80% chance that the SBR gets created and the 200,000 coins are stashed in the SBR and earmarked for long-term hodling. As far as adding to it, I'm less convinced that that's going to happen, but I still think it's a decent chance to happen, like above 5%. So if both of those things happen, to me, the game theory says if I'm a nation state, the United States, most powerful nation on planet, they have the global reserve currency, and the United States says, okay, we are, basically like the knighting Bitcoin as a global reserve asset, an important global reserve asset, and we're holding it in a reserve along with oil and gold, etc. So if you're saying, okay, this is as important as oil and gold, and it's the most powerful country on the planet, like you would be negligent as operators of a nation state to not also create a reserve and also add Bitcoin to your treasury. I just don't understand how that could not happen. And if that does happen, then you get the HODL FOMO race where everyone has figured out you got to hold this thing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years forever. This is the future of global reserve asset. And it's a stampede to accumulate as much as possible. The demand is just insane. And who knows where it stops. So I think it's above $1 million. So I would say that chance is 10%. I'm very much like I'm a strong believer in that number, and maybe it should be higher.
You got to show, since we're talking about the SBR, show the Eric Trump photo.
Here we go.
So Eric Trump, let me be clear. Eric tweets this, not Sailor. Sailor retweets it, but Eric tweets this last night. And he says, like, me and my close friend united in one.
I'll reiterate. It's two friends, one passion, Bitcoin, with a rocket ship.
Two friends, one passion, Bitcoin. And it's at Mar-a-Lago. This picture, if you weren't heavily allocated to Bitcoin, you saw this picture, that's your buy signal. I mean, I think what people are underestimating in their attempt to predict the SBR is that the Trumps actually appear to be in, like they want Bitcoin. It is an authentic desire that they are moving towards. It is not like a mere political ploy or whatever. There's some other motivation besides just like popularity. And Eric appears to really like it. He appears to actually be personally passionate and interested in. And then he's going to be, and I've heard rumors as well of the relationship between him and Donald on this. And they're pushing for it. I mean, they are authentically pushing for it behind the scenes.
I do have to say that in talking to some people at the party, that who the people I was kind of talking to about the SBR and through you, Steven, very, very bullish on it happening, telling stories about who they're talking to and who's looking at this thing and the feedback they're getting, etc. I also talked to some people at the party that had a fundamentally different view. This is unlikely to happen. And they're kind of dismissed it as an unlikely or basically asking too much. It's like they're like, yes, the crypto industry, Bitcoin industry supported the administration, supported all kinds of pro Bitcoin candidates who were successfully elected, like 98% of them or something ridiculous like that. But that a strategic Bitcoin reserve is just asking too much. The United States is not ready to do that. And the prudent, like that Trump would do the prudent thing and punt on it, and do something less important, as kind of a favor to the industry that supported him. So that wasn't a different take, and this is from a person who does policy stuff in DC, and it's also kind of ear to the ground. So just wanted to share that as well. There are people out there who have ear to the ground that are not as nearly as bullish on the idea of an SBR happening as others in the industry who are also have their ear to the ground. So there is some divergence there in opinions, and just thought I'd note that.
That's correct. But I will say a caveat there. I think we're talking about the same person. And I also had a and you're correct. There's kind of much lower probability, more skepticism. What he told me, though, was the caveat, like the curveball that doesn't account for is if Trump actually wants to do this thing.
Right.
If there's an authentic desire. And I think increasingly that is what we're seeing. I think your odds that this isn't just like political maneuvering, but for whatever reason, Eric and President Trump, they actually just love Bitcoin.
Well, that's why I think that, the Eric Trump photo with Saylor is another sort of, proof point in the idea that this is actually going to happen. And also his speech that he gave, where was that, the Mania conference? He showed an understanding, legit understanding of what Bitcoin is and why it's important. So if he's, influencing his dad on this subject, that seems pretty bullish.
I think whatever your odds were about the SBR after that photo with Saylor, you should increase them 15%. I mean, I think it was that much.
Yeah, I'm at a Pareto now. I'm going to go 80-20. We'll see what happens. All right, Brandon.
Let's talk about this Trump thing quick.
Okay.
I think it's black and white clear that he has to throw a bone to the Bitcoiners. We came out for him in a big way. The question is, what does Trump think is a bone to throw us? Right. In Nashville, he said strategic Bitcoin stockpile, as in don't sell the Bitcoin versus a reserve. That's what he said. What if all he thinks he needs to do for us is don't sell the coins and some regulatory benefits, and Bitcoin hits 150 next year? That's good enough, right? That could be his position, because what if he runs into challenging headwinds in DC getting things done, right? And that comes back to your point, Stephen. I think it's inevitable that he'll run into challenges the harder he runs at this. And then the question does actually become, does he personally need this to happen or want this to happen? And is he willing to spend political capital for it? So I could still see him saying, hey, I did you guys a solid, the best Bitcoin president ever. I got you to 100K. We're not selling the coins, and we got a new SEC chair. The rest is on you, baby. I could see that.
Yep. And I think that's totally reasonable. I think that's something you could definitely see. But, I bet that's not what Michael Saylor was talking to him about at Mar-a-Lago yesterday.
The Roman Empire, the longbow, gravity, missiles, projectile, infinite.
Yeah, I don't think Saylor was saying, here's the bare minimum that you should do. I don't think bare minimum comes out of Saylor's mouth.
No. And I've heard some kind of rumors, right, that Trump has said that he views an increasing Bitcoin price as a meaningful barometer of his success. He wants to see that number going up in the same way he loves seeing the stock market go up. I've heard that he has said in conversations that he wants to see it. He wants to see it over 150 within the first few months, and he wants to see that price increasing. And, Eric Trump at Middle East, I mean, he threw out $1 million Bitcoin. I mean, there are prices that have been thrown out. And I just ear to the ground reading the tea leaves. I'm just much more on the side that for whatever reason, these guys are they're in. They somehow are in.
To just steelman that, there is a lot of, it's not even for whatever reason. they were getting kicked out financially. They were getting lawfare attacks left and right, all kinds of stuff. They're genuinely, they probably found Bitcoin because they actually need it, because they're getting attacked from the state in all these different ways. And so I think that they deeply, deeply, deeply align to it in a way that no previous administration does. So I think that, you know, and Eric Trump did say that in the Mania conference. So
I want to highlight something that Quittem said, this idea of a stockpile versus a reserve. And this has been like a little sub debate going on this topic, that the TLDR is basically stockpile is just you hold the asset kind of like a sovereign wealth fund. It's just like, hey, this might appreciate in value. It'll be good for the balance sheet, good for the fiscal situation, all things equal, blah, blah, blah. A reserve gives Bitcoin much more of like an explicit monetary tie-in. You start saying like, oh, this is going to support the dollar or potentially back the dollar one day. That makes it more like a reserve. And there are people out there who have voiced more of an opposition or a hesitancy in calling it a reserve. So I just want to throw that out there. We can debate that if you want. I didn't want to necessarily debate that now. But the what I think is interesting is that this is my prediction. If they only do a stockpile and they only do it by holding the 200,000 roughly Bitcoin they already have, and if corporate adoption, basically the MicroStrategy LBE playbook, happens the way that I personally think it's going to happen in 2025, put all those things together, I would be shocked if Bitcoin only hits 150K. Like, I think just those alone are enough to take it well above 150K in 2025.
Okay. So I pulled up the Poly market again. Steven and I are saying 50% over 250. I think that's what we said. I think that's about right. What would you put it at, John? What percentage chance over 250 and what percentage chance all the way to...
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is like, it just has to hit this, right? If I'm reading it correctly, what price will Bitcoin hit in 2025? It's not saying it has to sustain this for the whole year and end the year there. So it's like, you just have to hit it at some point. So yeah, I mean, like I said, if I'm kind of thinking a bare minimum is that the US says we're holding the 200K Bitcoin as a stockpile, and corporations are going to go really hard at Bitcoin adoption. And obviously individuals and wealthy individuals are going to continue as well. So I think put all that together, I think 200 is like a better than 50% chance. I think 250 is maybe even better than, I don't know, better than 40% chance is like rough numbers in my head.
All right, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't have any novel opinions. I agree. I'm a buyer of everything I see on the screen, and similar range to what you guys are saying. The question for me is, I'm not well versed in poly market. Is poly market, are they bearish posturally towards Bitcoin? Is there any way to discount these like that? What's the poly market discount here?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No,
I wouldn't say. Yeah.
I don't think there's some kind of bias against it. It's a very crypto friendly.
That's what I thought.
Platform.
44% that we see a 50% gain temporarily in the next 362 days. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so it's 100% at 200K, and that historically is completely, like, we've seen it in the third green year of this 4-year cycle pattern that we're seeing. So I would say, like,
okay, we need to form a Swan Signal Live Poly Market account, and we need to start betting.
Let's just buy the Bitcoin, bro. We can have a treasury for the show.
Okay, fair. But I think we can at least do a paper portfolio. I think we should start like I think the 44%, the 24% is the most mispriced. 200 at 24. I think that's the most mispriced, and I would bid that, and we should come back in 6 months and see how that did.
Yeah, we'll track it. We'll see how it is. So let's say we're a big buyer at the 200,000 at 24%. I think 250 is probably more like 24%. And I think $1 million is more like 5. Like 5 is probably good. 10% if certain things happen. I just think it's possible that yes, this time is different, but like, how can you not say say yes, this time is different when you're staring at a possible strategic Bitcoin reserve for the most powerful nation on the planet. That is fundamentally different than anything we've seen on a scale than anything we've seen.
Let's go back to January of the beginning of the previous bull market. So the analog would be January 3rd of 2017 or 2021, right? You have the slow run up year the year before, and then you have the big blow off top the following year. We're in the following year now. To concede, yeah, let's see this. 2021. Oh,
so 2021 was kind of cut short, as we spoke about earlier. 2017 was a 1,300% run up. That's what you look at. So it'd be 1,000% to go to $1 million, and we've seen this in 2017 before. So it's not like completely crazy, and we have these fundamental factors that could happen to drive it, and they would have to happen to drive it, in my opinion.
I also think there's comparisons that are going to come into play this time. When I say comparisons, I mean like relative value analysis that people are going to do that they were not doing in 2017. So for example, no one was really saying now's a good time to buy Bitcoin because it's this percentage of gold's market cap. I mean, maybe some people were talking about that as like a really long-term thesis, but they weren't like buy Bitcoin this year because it's going to, compress towards gold's market cap. We're at the point where you're getting closer to that. And to me, that's just like, that almost sets more of a ceiling. If you see companies and nation states adopting it, people are going to do that rel-val analysis and be like, okay, it's still half the market or whatever, a third the market cap of gold. Like this has more room to run. I think that comes into play when you get professional macro asset allocators in the picture. They do things like that. And there was no one, like in any meaningful way, no one in 2017 was thinking of it in those terms.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So John, would they say, hey, we're approaching the gold's market cap, there's a little magnet that's going to pull it up there? Or how would they make decisions based off of that?
I think it would be one data point out of a series of data points that would just say, because remember, it is hard to quantitatively value Bitcoin. It does not have earnings. It does not have cash flow. We all hear the haters use that as an argument to not hold it, which obviously I think is foolish. But in terms of like a quantitative valuing of Bitcoin, it is kind of hard to do because you just look at it and it's like, it doesn't have a PE that it needs to live up to. So you have to come up with other ways to do it. And I just think that if the world that is staring you in the face is massive countries are adopting it, large corporations are adopting it, and it's still only 20% the value of gold, they're going to look at that and be like, all right, we're only in the second or third inning here. So yes, it ran up a lot in price, but we're still comfortable making an allocation. Not everyone will come to that conclusion, but I think that certain entities will think that way.
Okay, let's take a look at least one more here. All right. Well, a new country, and let's try to, I know Steven's got to head out in a few minutes, so let's try to get it to one or two of these. Which will a new country buy Bitcoin in 2025?
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
I think this could be higher.
It's at 75% right now in the poly market.
I think you should have it at 90, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Especially given the rumors about UAE, and there are other rumors.
Countries have already done this. Like,
yeah, there are countries that were buying 12:01 a.m. on January 1st, most likely DCing it. Okay, we'll see. Let's see this next one. Let's do. Hold on, I got to switch tabs real quick. All right. Did we do this one? I feel like we did. We've talked a lot about it. Okay, here's the U.S. National Bitcoin Reserve in 2025 market. Gives it a 40% chance to happen. Like I said, I'm 80-20.
Go down to the rules. Double click on the rules right there.
The market will resolve to yes if the U.S. government holds any amount of Bitcoin other any amount of Bitcoin in its reserves at any point between January 1 and December 31st. So basically, it means that they're creating a reserve and putting the coins in it.
What does it mean in its reserves? Like, I feel like that is the like legalistic point there. Like, is a stockpile in its reserves, or does it have to be a formal financial asset that is like it's foreign exchange reserves? That's my question there.
It says confiscating doesn't count, and all the Bitcoin they hold now is confiscated. So that would mean net new coins in the pile, or pay taxes into the pile, right?
Or they mean that just them confiscating new coins doesn't count. Like, there's just a lot of ambiguity on the wording.
Well, I mean, I think what we were talking about earlier, I'm like at 80-20. I think all of us sort of gave. I know Steven's up there with me. John or Brandon, do you guys have any like divergent view of the 80-20? Or you think it's less likely?
Which thing in particular that they add net new?
No, that they just put these, they create, what is the program called where oil and gold is reserved? It's a government program.
Yeah, a strategic petroleum reserve.
Right, but like all of those reserves, gold and oil, are managed by there's an acronym or an agency or whatever program that's managing these reserves. So I think to me, it's the creation of a reserve within that program alongside oil and gold. And you put the 200 in it. I think that's really solid. And that's what the EO does, that BPI has put out.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I would never go higher than 80 on anything like this. So that's about as high as it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
Trump's a wild card. Everyone around him's a wild card. The whole world's a wild card right now.
All right, let's do one more. Will one of the Magnificent Seven companies announce that they're buying Bitcoin this year?
What? Are you kidding me, dude? They have this at 64%, but they have the strategic reserve at 40%. Yeah. That's so inverted.
Yeah,
I think this is much more unlikely, and the reserve is much more likely.
I agree. To be fair, this is another betting market called Kalshi. But still, that shouldn't make too much of a difference. I agree. So 64%.
Oh, hold on. They're including Tesla. Okay. I could see Elon buying more.
Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Apple, Alphabet, NVIDIA, and Tesla. Yeah, that's true. That would probably be the most likely.
I think
that would definitely be the most likely.
Yeah, Tesla, I would put this like under 40%.
Yeah, it's Zuck or Tesla. That's what would happen on that list.
Yeah, that's it.
And in general, I think I've made this point on the show somewhat recently, but like these big tech companies have been such solid performers for their shareholders. Like they're not really dying. Think about Michael Saylor, right? He was like wondering what to do in 2020 with this accumulated capital. The business is kind of stagnant. Shareholder returns has not been great. Like it made way more sense for him to explore this. Obviously, you have to become passionate about Bitcoin as well. But like these big companies have just crushed it for the last like 30 years. I'm not saying that Bitcoin couldn't help them further, but just from like a necessity and an incentive perspective, they're not really itching to be like, oh man, we've got to find something to deliver more shareholder returns. So I'm with you guys. I think I'd be shocked if Meta did it. I wouldn't even bet over 50% on Tesla doing it. And I think the other ones are like low single-digit % chance.
I think Zuck's going to do it. Have you seen? Okay. Do you see his picture on New Year's Eve? He's got Gen Z. He's got the floppy Gen Z thing. He's got a chain. He only eats beef that he grows in Hawaii. That all the cows eat is acorns. He's trying to do a glow up. He's still got to crush the Winklevi. So there's some revenge narrative there. He's willing to take big bets.
All right. So what do you think? What do you put it at percentage that Zuck buys Bitcoin through Meta?
33%.
Nice. All right. Yeah. That's a big one.
I would say the chance that someone who is not Zuck and not Elon buys it is 5%.
Agree.
I would short anybody but them doing it.
Same.
If we get an SBR and if Elon is still part of the Trump administration, I would put Elon's buying it at 80% more Bitcoin. If we don't get the SBR, or if Elon is not in it anymore than, 20% and under.
I feel the same. Also, Zuck said, "Hey, sorry for censoring everyone during COVID." One more data point for based Zuck.
Interesting.
Oh, he's pivoting for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, Steven's got to go. Steven, you want to say anything before you hop off, and then we'll go around the horn, and I've got a shield to make. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think check out. Can you pull up my last tweet real quick? Is that possible to do real quick?
It is. Just give me a second.
Cool. The one, the end of the beginning. It should be like the last one or like 2 or 3.
As Brady's pulling that up, I'll just do one quick shout out for any of you looking on the screen on Polymarket. The way those work is if you buy it for like 40 cents, being correct pays you out $1. Just FYI, like that's how that system works.
Okay, so I see one that you've retweeted. What's it start with? The
It's
end of
like
the end of the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Put this up real quick.
All right, so here we go.
So you guys can check this tweet out, but I wrote this morning reflecting on the party and everything else. And it's about this changing moment in Bitcoin, right? So in the earliest days of the printing press, only the church, wealthy patrons, and academic institutions could access a printing press. And it was exclusively used to produce the Gutenberg Bible for a while. So it had a religious uses. So there's this new technology, and the only people that have access to it in the beginning are a very small group that use it for effectively a religious end. I think Bitcoin was similar, right? It was a very small group, and they were using it effectively religiously. It was this mission to change the world, to free the world from fiat. It was a very kind of ideological, motivated, and we're at a moment where that's changing. And much like the printing press now is used for all sorts of things. And the early printing press people might have been like, no, you're only supposed to use it to make the Bible. That's it. Like printing presses are for making the Bible. We're at a similar juncture with Bitcoin where people from that very kind of early ideological faction are upset and concerned because they're seeing people adopt Bitcoin that aren't concerned with like the freedom money angle. And I wrote this just to say, like, welcome to the next phase. That is what's going to happen. And you need to strap in and get ready for this. Like, but specifically, this is what winning looks like. This is what Bitcoin winning looks like. And you need to make peace with and understand that a huge number of people, many more people, are going to adopt this thing that you are not ideologically aligned with. And welcome to the history of the world. And we are at this juncture.
I like the analogy a lot. And we talked about this a lot over this past week in Miami, just the feeling of this is the end of the beginning. We're going into the sort of early majority phase out of the early adopters phase. And, if we had $1 million Bitcoin party, I think it would feel quite a bit different in terms of the people there. You'd see a whole lot more, traditional financial people there, political people there, media, etc. That depends on how you curate the guest list, but that I could see that being the party, right? Whereas this year was mostly kind of early adopter people, educators, and people running Bitcoin businesses, etc. And it just felt like the end of that sort of gathering, if that party were thrown again. So yeah, I agree with you completely. We're in a new phase now, moving up that adoption curve. And remember, everyone, like, this is a S-curve adoption. Like, this is a technological, exponential technology, following that S-curve that all of these technological exponential technologies have followed throughout the past 100 years plus, right? This happens. It's been proven thousands of times. And this is an exponential technology built on the internet, which is, of course, an exponential technology. So the suddenly is a thing. And I could see the suddenly happening this year. There's a distinct possibility that we start running up that asymptote really, really fast, and it blows everybody away. And it's not something that we can intuitively understand. We repel that idea. We don't our brains do not like exponentials. They do not quite grok them or understand them. Someone who really does grok them is Ray Kurzweil. who wrote the book The Singularity is Near and other books to that end, talking about the development of AI and other exponential tech. And that guy gets it. And his like predictions on the evolution of these technologies has been pretty much right on. He called for AGI by the end of the 2020s. And it looks like we're on track for that, if not doing it a bit earlier. So anyway, that's a mind. We have to think more like Ray to really understand what's happening here. And I think that when that suddenly hits, it's going to surprise even us and others when we're going through it. So just hang on to that. The suddenly will be here at some point, and I could see the setup for it happening right now.
See you guys. I got to run.
Thanks, Steven. Appreciate you, man. All right, guys. Any last words?
Yeah,
Brandon?
one follow-up to this one. So because people will say, hey, if this is true and we go to the next phase, do we lose the principles of Bitcoin? Right. And I think I need to do some writing about this. I've got a dusty essay from a few years ago I never published that kind of goes along this. And also a conversation we had with Sailor at the event, which was, is Bitcoin a 50-year money or a 500-year money? I think it's at minimum a 50-year money, meaning we take center stage over this next period. But it's not clear to me that we make it to 500-year money. And one of the risks for getting to that next stage, and I don't want to break down this whole argument now, but one of the risks to that is the new buyers don't care about self-custody. They don't care about the cypherpunk principles, which I think is 100% true. No way around it. That is true. Then the question would be, can Bitcoin survive that phase shift? And TBD. But I think that the strongest argument in favor of Bitcoin surviving is that Satoshi created the supply schedule to be exponential. So 50% of the 21 million came out in the first 4 years. And then 25% of the total supply came out in the next 4 years. So 8 years into this thing, 75% of the supply was unleashed. And who bought it in those first 8 years? Ideologically aligned people. And so those folks overwhelmingly keep their coins in self-custody, and the marginal buyers in the future overwhelmingly will not. And so the fact that the majority of the supply is held by individuals, primarily in self-custody, gives me confidence that we survive this next the Bitcoin eating governments and corporations and central banks, whatever this next phase is, the merging of the two. I have confidence simply because of that supply curve.
Love it. Can't wait to read that one. I'll edit it. Throw it my way. I would love to help however I can.
I need the social pressure to write. Writing's painful.
Okay. I can be your accountability partner on this one. All right, John, any final words for today?
No, you guys said a lot there. So I'll leave it there. I'll just say what Steven brought up in his tweet that he just talked about, what Quittem brought up, that this is going to be an ongoing theme. You're going to hear us talk more about these things throughout the whole year to come. So get ready for it.
Get ready, 2025. Stick with us every Friday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be here chopping it up about Bitcoin with my boys. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you next week at this time. Again, oh, and guess what? Today was Genesis Day. Next Friday then is the anniversary of the first transaction from Satoshi to Hal. So we got a couple of fun Bitcoin holidays to celebrate. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, 11 a.m. PT, 2 p.m. ET on Fridays. You can watch the recording on YouTube. You can watch it on Twitter. You can also listen to it on a podcast. Just search up Swan Signal Live in your podcast app and subscribe. Also wanted to tell you a little bit about, real quick, we have a card. Let me pull it up here. This is the Swan card. We are launching this Q2, we're expecting. So go to swan.com/card. It's a Bitcoin rewards credit card. It's the Bitcoin rewards credit card. And we are going to drop those Q2. You can sign up for the priority access list at swan.com/card. You'll get some emails from us when we have updates about the details of the card, and you'll be able to get your hands on it earlier than everyone else. So swan.com/card. Just throw your name on there, and we'll let you know when it's coming out and what all the details are as they are able to be made public. Would love to have you guys join us there and let us know what you think about the Bitcoin Rewards credit card. And also, we were just speaking about this new sort of cohort that's coming in that are really from the traditional finance world. They're running companies like MicroStrategy, maybe not like Sailor in particular, but other companies that want to start running an LBE program that's not, they're not really, their incentive is not to, you know, the same cypherpunk ideals or like enforce those. So I'd like to play this video from the Human Rights Foundation to think about like, what's the other side? What's the freedom money side of things too? And keep that in mind as this thing goes. For me personally, I think for a lot of Bitcoiners, as Bitcoin continues to get adopted in the mainstream financial system and numbers going up, in my mind, I'm also thinking, look, this is really, really important. That's why I'm here, is to disrupt fiat money, to kill fiat money, because it is an absolute plague on our society and our civilization. Right. So we need to free people from the shackles of fiat money all around the world. And the Human Rights Foundation is doing a great job at doing just that and keeping that priority in mind. So they put out a great video to celebrate the new year. And I thought I'd go ahead and share it here. So let's take a look. And it's not coming up. Womp womp. Sorry, everyone. I'm not going to be able to add it in time to run it for the show. We'll post it from I'll post it from my handle on Twitter at Citizen Bitcoin, or you can find it on the HRF feed as well. Give it a, I think it's an inspiring video, and it helps me stay focused on the freedom money mission in the midst of all this number go up and traditional financial world action that's happening. So check that out. Thanks again for joining. We will be back next week, and we will see you there. Take care.